Hello, MDLZ learning community. I'm sure you've all heard the phrase, begin with the end in mind. Well, when it comes to designing learning experiences that meets the needs of our learners and the business, that couldn't be more true. That's why it's so important to start with learning objectives. Learning objectives are like the roadmap for your learning experience. They provide a clear direction and focus on the outcomes you want to achieve, and they ensure that the content you create is relevant and impactful to your learners. Clear and concise learning objectives provides direction and focus, just like a map does, and helps us stay on track. And learning objectives aren't just for learners. We as learning professionals benefit from them too. They help us design learning experiences that really hit the mark and meet our learners' needs and goals. So, how do you create learning objectives? Start by asking yourself 3 questions. First, what do you want your learners to be able to do after completing the learning experience? Second, how will you measure their progress? And finally, what conditions will they need to demonstrate their new skills? It's helpful to start by understanding the differences between learning objectives and learning goals. A learning goal describes in broad terms what the learners will be able to do upon completion of the learning experience, whereas a learning objective describes, in specific and measurable terms, specific elements that learners will have mastered upon completion of the learning. The key words here are specific and measurable. Goals are broad. They help you focus on the big picture, though your learning objectives should be much more specific. Goals give you directions to write your learning objectives, but you should never confuse these two. Bloom's taxonomy is an important tool to help develop learning objectives. Bloom's outlines the classification of learning objectives according to the cognitive process involved in the minds of learners, and helps you understand the natural order involved in human learning according to how your learners will process information you present. For example, the learning objectives for a compliance training would be about making sure employees know the company's policies and principles, which is level 1 knowledge, whereas the learning objectives for a process or systems training must be about making sure employees are able to put what they learned into applicable practice, which is a level 3 application. Using the SMART framework for setting and achieving goals can also be used to write learning objectives that are clear, specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. Here's how to use SMART to write learning objectives. Specific. Clearly define what you want to achieve with your learning objective. Be specific about what needs to be learned and what learners are able to do as a result of your learning. Measurable. Identify the metrics or indicators that will allow you to measure learner progress and determine if the objective is achieved. Achievable. Ensure that your learning objective is realistic and feasible. Consider existing knowledge and resources, as well as any potential challenges that may arise. Relevant. Ensure that your learning objective is relevant to the learning goals. Consider how achieving this learning objective will help improve skills, knowledge, or performance. Time-bound. Set a deadline or timeline for achieving the learning objective. This will help learners stay focused and motivated and make progress toward that objective. By following the SMART framework, you can write clear and effective learning objectives that will help learners achieve learning goals efficiently and effectively. How can you make sure you are communicating learning objectives clearly to your audience? Learning objectives need to be as specific as possible. Here are a list of specific, measurable verbs you can use when writing learning objectives for each level of Bloom's taxonomy. Take a screenshot of this list or access a downloadable version from the Learning Excellence Hub within the Learning Design Support page. Here are some extra tips to ensure that you're on the right track with creating learning objectives. Assessments are used to evaluate what your audience is learning, and any assessment questions, either pre- or post-assessment, need to align to the learning objectives. When writing objectives, Consider using the list of verbs within Bloom's taxonomy that were mentioned earlier. Analyze your learners' needs before developing your objectives. Ask yourself, what do they already know? And what's necessary for them to learn? Ask yourself if the objectives are achievable within the time span of the learning experience, and if they are supported with additional tools and resources. Use simple and direct language. Limiting your objectives in one sentence will help learners focus better on what's expected of them. Divide the objectives into subcategories, if needed, to help avoid overwhelming your learners. Creating relevant learning objectives are the cornerstones for developing an effective learning experience that meets the needs of our learners and the business, and provide a clear direction and focus on the learning outcomes you want to achieve. I hope you found this video helpful, and don't forget to check our Learning Excellence Hub to learn more about how to create learning experiences that wow our learners. Thank you for watching.